Hi everyone, praise the Lord. This is the day that the Lord has made. I'm so excited today to be able to come to your screens. It's been a while and I hope that you're doing good and that God has been with you. Now, I don't know if you have been, watching news or following up on your church and following up on the things that are going on. My job or my main call is for the church. And so today I want to talk about the church. And I want to give you or to speak about the signs of a dying church. Now, I know it's rare that we talk about this. Most of the times, people talk about the signs of a growing church. There are books written on church growth, church development, church, all this stuff about church. But the most interesting thing is that there are so many churches today that are being closed. In fact, the statistics say that in America, approximately every day there are 7,000 churches that are closing their doors all across America. The reason I'm using America as a statistics is because that's the available statistics that we have. I don't know about Africa, but I have a feeling that even though it looks like churches are being opened every day in Africa, I believe there are more churches that are being closed in Africa than are being opened. And so I want to talk about the signs of a dying church. What do you look out for? Is it possible for a church to die? Is it possible for a church that has been vibrant, has been doing very well? Is it possible for it to actually die? Have you ever seen a church that existed, but then after a while, they just had to close their doors? Okay. One of the things that we have to understand, or maybe I'll try to make everyone understand, is that the death of a church doesn't just happen. Sometimes it takes a long time for it to actually come to pass. And so there are churches that die in a period or in a span of approximately 10 to 15 years because the decline is very slow. It is easier for churches to grow. You can detect when the church is growing, but then can you detect when the church is dying? And this is where most of us, most Christians, actually go wrong. Have you ever noticed that it is easier for people to die than to change? In fact, people prefer dying than changing. Now, they don't do this by saying, oh, me, I prefer dying or change instead of changing. No. But it is written, or the statistics say that over 80% of people who go to hospitals, and they go to hospitals with various diseases, and they are advised by the doctor to change their lifestyle, to change what they eat. 80%, over 80% of people don't actually change. Yet they have very clear instructions from the doctor that if you don't change, you will die. So, consciously or unconsciously, most people choose to die rather than change. And that is the main problem. So, let me give you sign number one. I'm going to give you 13 signs, which is just taking up some signs, but you can go and check for more. Number one is a dying church exhibits the signs of an unhealthy prayer culture. When the church begins to die, there is no prayer going on. Okay, the prayers that are going on are unhealthy and they cannot sustain a church. There is no community prayers. The church does not pray together. The leaders, the team leaders, don't pray together. So the first sign is prayer culture. Every church needs a vibrant prayer culture. If the church has placed or decided on a day when it is a day for prayer for the church, and the pastor does not show up, that is already a sign of a dying church. And when I talk about prayer, what I'm saying is prayer is supposed to be led by the senior pastor of that church. So if you're the senior pastor of a church and you have prayer meetings or prayer days that are happening in your church and you're not showing up, you are contributing to the death of your own church. Now, that is a harsh thing to say, but it is important to say it because most people, as I said, choose to die rather than change. So, in other words, if you're the senior pastor and you have called for prayers or you have a prayer culture or a prayer day that you have set aside show up as a pastor. When you show up, other people will show up. Whether it's a weekday, a Sunday, whatever day, when you show up, other people will show up. The number 2 sign is attendance begins to decrease. Again, friends, this is not so real. It's not something that happens so fast, but it is as real can be. Attendance begins to decrease. Let's say, for example, you have a church that has 100 people, and last year you were 100, but then this year you are 97, 96. You see, that's a very small change. You may not even notice it because 3 people, 4 people have not shown up. The last 1 year you have lost 2 people, 3 people. The next year you lose another 3. And the next year you lose another 3. If that happens consistently within a short period of time, you'll have lost 50% of your members. And you will not even have noticed the decrease. So attendance begins to decrease consistently. You begin to lose members. And you can lose members because you are not a good preacher. You see, the thing is, we preachers think we are the best. Sometimes we are not the best. You're not the best preacher. And these are the things that I try to talk to people about, to talk to my friends. You are not the best preacher there is. Some people come to that church and they endure your preaching. They don't enjoy it, but they still sit there. It's just a matter of time before they leave you. And they will leave that church because of you. Not because you are bad, not because of anything, but because you're not a good preacher. Other people will leave your church because they have found other places to work. They have relocated. Others will move because they have been married. Others will move because they have kids. And your church doesn't have a nice Sunday school. And so they'll go to a place where there is a nice Sunday school. You see, these are the realities that we have to look at. These are the things that we have to come to terms with if you want your church to thrive and grow. Number 3, people aren't being saved. Okay? Now, if you're in a church and every Sunday you're preaching and you're not calling for the salvation altar call, your church is dying. We are in the business of souls, my friends. So if your church, if there is no salvation being recorded or no invitation to salvation being given or being given in your church, then you are dying as a church. Again, remember, you don't have to die in the next 1 year. It may take a year, 2 years, 10 years for you to die. But you must begin to make the call for salvation. We are in the business of souls. You will be surprised, in fact, that if you do this thing every Sunday, the people who will actually come to commit their lives to Jesus are people you thought were born again. Very surprising. All right. Then, number 4, the giving begins to decrease. Offerings, tithes and offerings. And you see, this is also a measure of a church that is either dying or growing. If you're a pastor and you can say a few years ago, your church, the giving of your church was very nice, but suddenly it has decreased, begin to reevaluate everything around you to see whether this is a dying church or it can be saved. Now, let me be blunt. The first sign or the main sign of a dying church is usually the giving and the altar call, salvation. No, people are not getting saved. And then the giving begins to decrease. You find yourself in a lot of financial problems, all right? Then number 5 is the age of the congregation. You have an older congregation and there is no younger people that are coming. So the more time goes, you realize you are preaching to an older generation, but you don't have younger people coming. So the church has no future, okay? And so you must begin to ask yourself, how do we reach the younger people so that there is a future in this church? You may even begin to think of how you can hand over the leadership of that church to a younger person, to a younger generation, so that this person comes and revitalizes or revives the church. Okay? And then number 6, lack of disciple making. You are no longer reproducing as Jesus would have. There is no multiplication. As a pastor, you're not reproducing yourself in others. And as a church, you're not reproducing other people into the community. that is also a sign of dying. In other words, what I mean is this: you are the only pastor, you're the only one who can prophesy, you're the only one who can pastor, you're the only one who can preach. You are not reproducing. In other words, when you have to travel to go to maybe a mission, you have no one in church that you can trust enough to take over the pulpit. And so you have to invite your friends to come and stand in for you as you leave. There is no team that can run the church. So then number 7, the church isn't serving others. You have moved now from serving other people to serving yourselves. This is a dying church. And let me tie it with point number 8. You are not involved in the community. Okay? Please understand that church is a community. The church itself within the congregation, that is a community. But also understand that church exists within a community. I can use examples and say maybe your church is in Nairobi City, okay? Your church itself is a community, but this community exists within Nairobi community. And so wherever you are part of a community. And one of the things that begins to make the church die is when the church stops serving the community. In other words, the church begins to lose the face of the community. The church does not look like the community. The church begins to go back into itself, back into its own walls, and therefore there is lacking the community engagement. You are not going into the community, so you're serving yourselves. Number 9 is change is resisted. The church itself begins to resist change. And this usually happens, and even now as I'm talking, there are some of you who are listening to me, and you are serving in a church, or you're a pastor, and you're already resisting what I'm saying. So the church resists change. You go to a church and you tell them, oh, if you want your church to survive from this death that is surely coming, you must change and bring in screens, and bring in, put up some color, some background that is very nice on the pulpit or the stage. And then they start saying, no, we haven't done that before. We want to stick to what we always do. And so we don't want the screens. Our eyes will hurt, okay? Now, if you want to appeal to a particular generation, there are things that you must do. If you want to keep evolving as a church and in growth, there are things that you must kick out, and there are things that you must allow to come in. When you resist change, nothing really works for you. Okay, and that's why we have so many young people walking out of churches, because they feel that churches are kind of old for them. They are no longer being accommodated in church. I'm not saying that you compromise on the gospel. I'm not saying that you compromise on your teachings. I'm not saying that you compromise on your doctrines. I'm just saying you look at the methodologies, a better way to communicate your doctrines, a better way to communicate the thing that you want to communicate, but then speak the language of these people. Number 10, congregation prefers, or the church is preference driven. And what I mean by this is that the pastor or the leadership of the church does not do things that are biblical. They do things that the congregation prefers them doing. Okay? And so if the congregation says we are not living, we are not changing, we are not moving from this structure to another structure, the leadership bows to that. And so things are not biblical, they are preference driven. So this is what we prefer, this is what I prefer. When you begin to do that, then the church begins to die. Affirmation from people is another sign where you want people to affirm you. You want the people you are worried about, and you keep asking yourself, what do people say about my church? When you begin to have that kind of mindset, it begins to become a problem, because then you are moving away from the mandate. And the great mandate is the Great Commission. And most churches have moved away from the Great Commission. The Great Commission has become the Great Omission. All right? And this is the next point that I want to emphasize. Your budget is focused inwardly. Okay? You begin to have, whenever you have money, whenever money comes or money comes in, There is no outreach programs. There is no evangelism programs. There is no great commission in your church. Instead, when the money comes, you begin to focus inwardly. You want to build a project, to build land, to build churches or buildings. You want to buy land. You want to do this. And so whenever any money comes, it goes back to the church. It doesn't go out. Yet the call that we have is to go out, to go ye out into the world. And as you go, make disciples. Go out, make disciples, preach, baptize all. That is the Great Commission. But today, the church, we have returned back to ourselves. We have put ourselves in walls. We have created fortresses for ourselves that no one can come out. You see, the other sign that your church is dying is when your church is preoccupied with projects and not souls. Projects and not souls. And this is why I say this. I have seen, a few weeks ago, I'm part of a WhatsApp group that has all these big people. When I say big people, they are people of influence. And so they were discussing, all of them are Christians. And there was a discussion about the Muslim community and other religions and how they are building malls and building big businesses, as religion. And so the church was being challenged to also come up with supermarkets and hypermarkets and malls and all this nice stuff. And I tell you the truth, Jesus did not die for us to build malls and cinema halls and all these supermarkets. Jesus died so that we can win souls. The impact that the church can have on this world is not based on how many estates we build as churches. We can build estates and still go to hell. We can build all these mega centers and towns and still go to hell. And one of the things I have noticed is this. Any church that begins to engage in such activities begins to die. Any church that begins to engage in building supermarkets, building all these centers of business trade begins to die. It is so real. And if you look at history, look at all the people who have tried to build those kind of stuff, estates where members of congregations can come and stay at affordable prices or affordable housing. They die there, okay? We talk about Jim Jones, who did the same things and then poisoned over 900 people, and they died. So these are signs. Another sign that your church is dying is when you become preoccupied with empowering people financially. Now, I know that is not a popular statement in today's world, but let me tell you one thing. Churches are not meant to start circles, savings, and cooperatives. Churches are not meant to begin to have financial services, okay? I know maybe there are some churches that it's working, but give it time. It will come crumbling down because that is not how it is aligned with, that's not how God has created it to become. And so there are churches that I know and there are pastors that I know who have been scandalized because they opened up businesses and savings and money stuff so that people can put money in there and try to make them wealthy. But then you realize that this is a quick fix, or it's almost like this thing we call pyramid schemes, and so people are giving money, and you're being told if you give this money towards this project, in the next 1 year you will have made a 50% profit. These are not financial principles. And so churches are getting into these things, and people are investing because they trust their pastors. It is one of the quickest ways for your church to die. And the last point is that innovation is rare. There is no innovation in a church that is dying. Whenever you come up with an idea and you want this idea to be followed and you want this idea to be implemented, they reject it. They reject innovation. They say you are not in the spirit, okay? And so please, let us be very careful about these signs. If you're a pastor, there are more signs. Go and read them. Go and just search, and you will see more signs that lead to the death of a church. We don't want churches to die. We have talked about church growth for a long time. but we are not talking about church death. And that is the key thing. If we can avoid death, we will definitely grow. Thank you. God bless you.